Right, so for this episode, seeing as I'm doing a food-themed thing, as you might already know, those of you who've already seen or will see the first episode of this week's Fun Facts with Liam, it's, food-themed. I've not already said that. Sometimes I lose myself in my explanations a little bit, which backtrack into a expanded explanation and blah blah blah. Yeah, I thought, I was trying to think of ideas and certain like attitudes and attitudes towards certain foods and status and where it all connects. And I was looking through a list, and I think a couple of basically I'm going to talk about two pretty much quite posh foods that have been posh for since relatively modern, recent-ish times. And what I mean is by recent-ish, both cucumber sandwiches and lobster-based dishes around the similar time in Victorian times and maybe a bit before were seen uh, as a rich person's food. Like, for example, if you've watched Boardwalk Empire, like I have, if you're a fan of any, I went on a bit of a HBO kind of binge for a bit. I watched Sopranos, bit of The Walking Dead. Never watched The Wire, not really, but I watched Boardwalk Empire before I got into The Sopranos, and a lot of the corrupt politicians in high society peoples, they really loved their lobster thermidor. That was like a really, really popular dish from probably 1880s to 1920s and a bit beyond that. But lobster, and I'll put the and I'll put this as like a reference in the description. When I was reading one of my favourite books, one of my go-to reads, Anne Rooney's 1001 Disgusting Facts, lobster was seen as like a proper desperate, readily available, I guess, trawlerman's food, and it goes all the way back to when when fishermen in Maine in the 1600s they'd basically lobster were commonplace in Maine, so that's what they'd have. It's sort of like how the Irish in the 1840s, were reliant on potatoes. It was easy to grow, and what was readily available for the general poor working man populace. But over time, over 200-ish years, lobster became part of different dishes. Like I said, lobster thermidor in late Victorian times and early 20s. For example, for high society, like I mentioned in Boardwalk Empire, you see, Steve Buscemi and Dabney Coleman in tucking into a nice lobster thermidor. I've always wanted to try it, but there's also actually quite fitting and relevant to this episode. As far as the thumbnail, I was searching for a specific thumbnail and see if there was a specific dish that combined cucumber sandwiches and lobster, and there's two. There's a spring roll sandwich type thing, and there's an Italian like similar bite-sized sandwich called a lobster trazzini. Probably completely butchering that pronunciation, as I generally say, but both are basically lobster and cucumber sandwiches. Now, I'm not fussed on cucumber sandwiches. I mean, everyone on my dad's side of the family loves cucumber sandwiches, but I'm not asked. I think I'm a bit boring, but I probably would really enjoy a lobster and cucumber sandwich. Probably go quite well. You know, you got the coolness of the cucumber and the leftover simmering steaminess of the lobster, but also probably a bit of a cool aftertaste because it's it's seafood. That's what shellfish is like. So I probably would enjoy that. So yeah, two two foods, two dishes, if you will, to an extent. Yeah, they became dishes. One became more of a dish than the other. Um, Cucumber sandwiches were like a basic staple for anyone who had like leftover bread and leftover cucumbers. You know, going back to the days where we didn't have fridges. So, and salt and butter was quite expensive. So people just had to basically use what was in the cupboards, and that's how cucumber sandwiches came to be. For example, for your average poor working man, and they became popular in Victorian times. Tea and cucumber sandwiches. They might have actually had cucumber sandwiches in. I think they're quite popular with Americans too, or they were similar traditions. In maybe 12 Years a Slave, I seem to remember. Um, there was a bit where Sarah Paulson and all the other snobs did the Victorian tea lady thing, and I think they had cucumber sandwiches and tea, but also macaroons. Like they really wanted to give the impression they were high society, but her and Epps, Michael Fassbender really weren't. They were just scum who were rich. So yeah, that's the story of two surprisingly related dishes that were for peasants that became fancy posh foods.